So everything we've done up to this point has followed the guidelines of HTML5. Now, as we continue to create a website and we learn how to implement CSS into our HTML, we will follow the correct standards for HTML5 and CSS3. So let's go ahead and take a look at our document and make sure things are correct. Now, the first thing we notice in our document is our doc type. And what we have written here, exactly how I have this written, is going to be the standard for HTML5. Now, this actually used to be a little bit more complicated, but doc type HTML will be the doc type declaration every single time, and it's very simple. Now, something else we can add to our head that we haven't thus far is going to be our char set, or our character encoding. And this is also going to be a fairly simple declaration compared to previous versions. So let's go ahead and inside our head, and we can put this above the title or below the title, we're going to do meta. So this is going to fall inside meta tags. And we'll do char set equals, and we'll have a bunch of different options here, but we're going to be doing UTF-8. And then this is a self-closing tag, so we'll just finish that up. So this essentially, and you don't have to know necessarily what's going on, but this is going to provide us with the correct characters that we'll need to use in any of our HTML that'll be displayed in the browsers, or at least all modern browsers. I also want to talk a little bit about HTML5 coding conventions, or specifically HTML coding conventions. And by this, I mean, what is our style of coding? How are we writing things? And we do have an option in some sense, because a lot of things we deal with that you'll deal with in other languages aren't necessarily going to be case sensitive, or we can add space, or we can, do stuff differently that not necessarily affects the actual output of our code or what the browser is going to display. So we know that we need to have our doc type as HTML, and that we need to create our meta char set as UTF-8. But there are a couple things that we're going to follow in this course, or a couple practices that are recommended. And let's go ahead and go through a few of these really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get rid of this entire form here and take a look at an example. So whenever we write a tag, whether it be body, and I'm going to write that. So this is acceptable, and this is going to work, but does it matter that we wrote it in caps? Well, best case scenario is to always keep our tags lowercase, and we definitely don't want to mix and match. So have, body capitalized here, and then have a lowercase body here. We want to make sure we keep our code consistent, and we're going to be developing our own styles, really. So make sure that you're consistent with what you do, and always, of course, make sure you're leaving comments around different sections of your own code. Another thing we're going to see is that, and I'm going to delete these bodies here. Oops, I'm just going to delete the bottom body here. Another thing we'll actually notice in HTML is we don't necessarily need to close some of our tags or specific elements. So let's go ahead and do a p tag, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. So luckily for us, brackets automatically closes our tags for us, which we always want to make sure we do. But if I write paragraph here, it's going to do the same exact thing as if I were to write an actual paragraph. So here is another. And if we go ahead and view this in our browser, we will see two paragraphs, and they have the same structure. So what is appropriate, or what should we be doing? Well, in this course, and I suggest you always do this, we're always going to make sure that we're closing our tags. We also have a couple options when it comes to closing our self-closing HTML elements. So let's take a look up here at our meta char set. So right now, this currently works, and this is totally acceptable, especially in HTML5. But what is also acceptable, and what you would have traditionally done, especially if you were coding for XHTML, is that you would have provided a backslash here to show that you're ending this tag. Well, you can do this as well, and this works just the same. But what I'll recommend is choose one now and stick with it. So if you're going to do an entire website, you want to close all your self-closing tags with this slash or not with this slash. And I say that because we want to maintain consistency in our own code. Another thing we want to take a look at is how we're spacing specific things, and then how we're spacing things vertically as well. So let's go ahead and I'm going to write, let's do P, so paragraph ID equals, I don't know, let's just do example, and then I'm going to close this out. So when we take a look at an example like this, I could have put a space here, right? And I can also put a space here. But what's the difference? Once again, it actually doesn't matter because this is still going to continue to work. In HTML, we want to make sure that we eliminate all possible space that we can unless we need it to implement a space in our actual content. We want to keep things as tight as possible. Now, obviously, that wouldn't include the P here. We do need this space. But if you have an equal sign, and this is usually going to happen after an equal sign, don't give it the extra space. Take that away. If you do want to give it the extra space, then I would recommend making sure that you're absolutely staying consistent with that as well. And also, this would be unnecessary space here. Now, obviously, it doesn't matter, and HTML is not going to read empty space and provide additional space. We know that we need a break tag, right? But what we want to do is make sure that we eliminate any unnecessary spacing as possible. Now, we do want to make sure that our code is readable, and we're going to do that by either hitting tab and indenting, or what you can do is hit space twice for a smaller indent. I use tab currently, but you can go ahead once again and adapt your own style at this point. And lastly, it really is okay if you have, say, a long gap of code that is accomplishing one thing. You can go ahead and throw an additional space in there, but I really do suggest let's try avoiding that. And also, one other thing, you want to try to avoid really long code lines. So if I have some code like this going out all the way over here, we want to make sure that it maintains readability. So let's try to, of course, keep this to a certain extent not too long.